Over the past decade, illegal immigration has been a top concern for voters in America, with Donald Trump successfully capitalizing on the legitimate frustrations people feel when they see people break into their country, suppress wages, and take jobs from Americans, erode cultural and societal cohesion and uniformity, appealing to our hearts and compassion, claiming they must flee from their violent and dangerous home countries and find safe refuge in our peaceful country, only to bring the same violent and dangerous cultural tendencies with them. And while a lot of attention is given towards illegal immigration, I don't think anywhere near enough attention is being given towards legal immigration. Illegal immigration is merely the most recent symptom of an 80-year-long ideological adoption by Western societies that we must be welcoming and open our countries, particularly to the third world, as some sort of moral obligation. And what we'll see in this video is, despite illegal immigration being all the rage today, legal immigration has arguably done more irreparable damage because it's allowed predatorial cultures to take advantage of the West's misguided compassion and empathy, infiltrate those countries culturally and politically, and destroy them from within. What made me actually want to make this video is the recent developments in Minnesota, where over 70 Somali residents who are legally here, business leaders, community leaders, political leaders, were arrested for defrauding the Minnesota welfare system out of $1 billion. So make sure you stick around till the end of this video. I think you will find it extremely interesting and eye-opening. And we're gonna see how legal immigration combined with progressive suicidal empathy led the West to inviting our enemies into our country and allowing them to destroy us from within. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel, but we're gonna start, coincidentally enough, with a Somali-born professor who converted to Christianity and is very outspoken against Islam. Explain why the West adopted this philosophy of suicidal empathy and how it has led to our downfall.
Number two, anti-Semitism is the oldest hatred in humanity, and you find it, believe it or not, across the entire world. What made the West different after they nearly exterminated their Jews was to have that honest look in the mirror and reckon with what they did, and then those campaigns to end it. Islamophobia is a made-up word. It's made up by a political movement that wants to exploit and capitalize on white guilt to achieve its end goal, which is the revival of the caliphate. And the revival of the caliphate is to convert all of us into Islam, whether we like it or not. Those of us who refuse to do that, we will surely be beheaded. I'm sure I'm on top. And that is their end goal. And so they're exploiting these Western part of subversion. This is just a guess.
So in order to rectify the evils of Nazi Germany, the West became very timid in wanting to determine what cultures were good, what cultures were bad, and which ones were compatible with Western values. Everyone was very raw to the atrocities of the Holocaust and were very trepidatious towards ideologies predicated on cultural supremacy. America being a cultural melting pot is already difficult enough, but the post-World War II pendulum swing was so drastic, and it gave birth to the social experiment that we shouldn't just invite people from cultures that are different than ours, we should invite people from cultures that are the exact opposite as ours. I'll see videos from the UK of quaint little towns that have loudspeakers blaring Muslim prayer early in the morning, taking advantage of our belief in the freedom of religion and imposing their religious practices on everyone as a result. And when you allow millions of people into your country whose religious beliefs tell them that the way in which the country they're migrating to operates is fundamentally wrong and needs to be changed, it has a widespread negative effect on the citizens who live there. Now let's listen to her continue to explain why these predatory cultures come here and exploit and weaponize our very foundational principles like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Take a look.
And yet the Islamists are winning. Islam is spreading. They're doing better today than they were doing in 2001 after they hit us and we invaded Afghanistan. They've got Afghanistan back. They have Iraq back. They have Syria. And these Muslim governments are they're shaking in their boots. They're worried about what could happen to them because of the Islamist movement. And that's why the Islamist movement came here. And they're exploiting principles like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, and so on. And of course, these progressive movements that we have here, we've got to understand that, and we've got to become really creative in finding a way of preserving our principles. I don't want to give up on the freedom of speech. But on the other hand, on beating the Islamists at their game.
They are exploiting the fundamentals that have created our peaceful, prosperous, and free society. The very same principles their culture and religion don't agree with, to enact their religious obligation to destroy our country from within and change it from a country that accepts religious diversity to one that is an Islamic theocracy. It's the same delusional philosophy that allowed Democrats to support 20 million illegal immigrants coming across our border during the Biden administration. But the moment we want to get these violent people out of our country, they hide behind the constitutional right of due process. And you can already see the disastrous effects of this hostile takeover in England. In England, it's totally permissible to burn a Bible, but if you burn a Quran, you'll go to jail. If you even happen to acknowledge and point out the disturbing prevalence of Pakistani nationals engaging in acts of sexual violence against young British girls, you will go to jail for Islamophobia. When people with antithetical cultures to Western values take over a Western country, they immediately start eroding the cultural foundation of religious freedom and in fact criminalize any critique of Islam. Their goal isn't to come to Europe or come to America to assimilate into Western society, to become a productive and contributing member. Their goal is to turn the United States into Iran. And that's what this professor explains to this delusional, naive college student who says if he was threatened with beheading if he didn't convert to Islam, well, he would just convert to Islam. What's so bad about that?
Islamists are active in Africa and violently so. If you're a Christian in Egypt or a Hindu in parts of Pakistan, and you have someone looking at you and saying, you'll either lose your head or you convert to Islam, it makes sense to consider converting to Islam. But here today, for us to have the attitude of, well, we'll see what happens, and if we get to that point, I'll just convert, I will say, are you sure? Maybe you want to get educated on what would happen once you convert. What would your life be like, and the life of your sisters and women? What would they do to the Jews? He has said, this man, I repeat it, he said they're bacteria and they're microbes. And in the video that I showed you, they made it very clear it has nothing to do with Palestine. It has everything to do with them being Jewish. So they are going to annihilate the Jews. Will you stand by and watch that? Maybe I should give Introduction to Islam and Islamism as a lecture series, and once you understand what it's all about, you might develop a backbone.
I would look forward to that greatly. Thank you very much.
Now, my cousin's husband is from Sweden, and a few weeks ago, I was talking on the phone with him and he was around one of his Swedish friends, and we started briefly talking about politics. And I asked him a very important question because Sweden is currently going through a huge immigration crisis from the Middle East. I asked him if 51% of Sweden's population was not actually Swedish people, would he be okay with that? And his answer was, yeah, he'd be fine with it. And it's that kind of spineless compliance that these predatorial cultures are relying on. Western culture slowly being eroded to a point where the very own domestic population has no national pride or desire for sovereignty, has no reverence for their cultural traditions, and will turn their backs while their country is being overthrown simply because they're too scared of being called a racist. And what he couldn't fathom, and what most liberals can't fathom, and why they're so surprised that Donald Trump is so popular, is we don't want that to happen in America. We believe American values and traditions are uniquely good and need to be preserved. Our founding principles that our rights are not given to us by a government. They are God-given rights that no man can take away. Our ancestors have bled and died time and time again to preserve those very beliefs. But it's not just Islam that's incompatible. Here is a guy from India who made a video on why Indians have such poor civic sense, why there is such a lack of cultural cohesion and unity and shared responsibility for their country, and further solidifies why you can't just pick people up from one place in the world, drop them somewhere else, especially when you do it by the millions, and expect it not to have a negative impact on society. Take a look.
When humans exploit shared resources for their own benefit and basically everyone else can't use that resource, that is tragedy of the commons. And what's more shocking is that recently there was a yoga day organized in Vizag, a community event where you can come, learn yoga, perform yoga, good for your health, great for the community. But everyone did this. They ran and started stealing the yoga mats, literally snatching it from each other. But you know what's even more sad? The yoga mats were actually free anyway. So all you had to do was queue up and everything was there for you anyway. And that's the sad part. You see, when the community is incentivized to break the rule, as in when someone breaks the queue, he gets the benefit, someone steals the mat, he gets the mat, and nothing happens, that's when tragedy of the common becomes worse because everyone is incentivized to break the rule.
And this is specifically why third world immigration never works. People who live in perpetual survival mode, and that's all they've ever known, can't integrate well into a society that puts a priority on consideration for others. In America, our children are taught, raise your hand before you speak, wait patiently in line. In India, it's just lawless mob rule. People are frantically trying to grab a yoga mat because their mindset is, I have to take it before someone else takes it, and I'm not able to have one. It doesn't even cross their mind that there could be enough yoga mats there for everybody to enjoy. It's a mindset that is cultivated from an environment of extreme scarcity. In the United States, we emphasize sharing. We emphasize generosity and charity because we live in a nation of abundance. But those cultural principles are taught to us from the earliest ages. They're not just natural human inclinations. That's why you get the $1 billion welfare fraud that's happening in Minnesota, because people from Somalia are culturally wired to see an act of generosity and think, how can they exploit it and take advantage of it? When you take one person from an impoverished, impolite, unmannered country and drop them in America, there's a very good chance they're going to assimilate into the culture. They'll be exposed to new cultural norms and values and tendencies. But if you drop 100,000 of those people in one area, they click up, they group together, they live together, and they perpetuate the very same behaviors that made their home country a place they wanted to escape from. And this is just basic common sense in human nature. If you take a kid from the inner city and drop him in a high-end suburban prep school, they're likely going to change for the better. Learn better habits, learn better behaviors, learn better values. But if you take 5,000 kids from the hood and drop them in that same high-end suburban prep school, they'll just all hang out together because it's what's comfortable, and they'll engage in the same destructive behavior that made their schools bad and their communities undesirable. And it ruins the very value of the entire prep school for everybody. Now, here he is explaining why some cultures mesh well with Western society despite being different. And no, it's not racist.
And this is called the endowment effect. The moment you feel shared resources are your own, you start to take care of it. Let me give you an example of Japan. So over there you'll see छोटे बच्चे actually going to school all on their own, and once they're in school they even clean their classrooms because it's ingrained in their culture that this shared space is my space. So they actually care about it. So when they grow up, naturally the entire population thinks of their city, their country as their own and not belonging to somewhere else. Therefore, they take care of its cleanliness and other things. In India, if you're following the rules, you'll get awkward stares. At least it's happened with me.
What he described is exactly why neighborhoods with high rates of homeownership tend to be much nicer, safer, cleaner than neighborhoods with a high percentage of renters. I'm a real estate investor, so I know this firsthand. Renters have no attachment to the property. They'll pour oil down the drains, they'll trash the property because at the end of the day, it's not theirs. They will just move somewhere else. Homeowners have a permanent attachment to their community, therefore making them much more likely to go the extra mile, to help one another, to be charitable, to put an emphasis on cleanliness and safety because they like where they're at and they don't want to leave. And when you extrapolate that to a country, immigrants are a lot like the renters, and the domestic population are the homeowners. Immigrants don't care in the same way about their fellow countrymen because they don't really see them as their countrymen. They view America and our generous communities throughout the country through the lens of, what can I take from this place? Not what can I give to this place? Because in the back of their mind, even if they plan on living here forever, they will always know this is not actually their country. They have no historical attachment to it. They have no reverence for the history and the sacrifices that were made to make this place as wonderful as it is today. And if it ever goes bad and this country becomes undesirable for them, well, it's easy for them to just up and leave and go somewhere else. Why other European countries and some Asian countries can integrate well into American society is they value a lot of the same things we do. Rule of law, strong family units, politeness, kindness, and consideration towards your fellow citizen, a strong sense of cultural, historical appreciation. But Latin American countries that find cartel violence acceptable, having sex with animals as common, Middle Eastern societies that will marry 9-year-old girls to 40-year-old men, that reject the concept of civil rights, African countries that practice female genital mutilation, where warlords rule with an iron fist and the concept of rule of law is almost non-existent. When you come from places like that and are simultaneously told by the modern left that you don't need to change your cultural values, that it's racist to even consider these people should try to assimilate into American society, that they don't even need to learn our language. It's no surprise when the citizens look around and they're frustrated because it's no longer a few immigrants who came here eager to be a part of the American fabric, who wanted to come to America because it is everything their countries are not, and they embrace that and they love that. Now it's just half your community that doesn't share the same culture as you, doesn't appreciate the same things, and hardly even speaks the same language as you. Not to mention, they're getting welfare from the government provided by your tax dollars that are making the lives of immigrants better while completely ignoring the domestic citizens' desire for prosperity. Now, I know I've been going on a rant here, but the final thing I'm going to show you from the guy talking about his home country of India to really hammer in the point about cultural differences is this sad, sad story about how kids in India commonly treat stray animals.
Swati and I used to stay in this area in Noida where there was a playground, and the playground obviously had lots of children, and there were 6 puppies. Now these 6 puppies were complete strays, and the kids were actually kicking each puppy, and the puppies were crying, and every time a boy kicked and the puppy cried, everyone clapped and laughed.
Now that broke my heart. I absolutely love dogs, but it just shows the extreme naivete of modern liberals who think that by somebody just magically popping up within the borders of America, they will somehow lose an entire lifetime of cultural upbringing from the country they came from. Not everybody can be changed. Not everybody can be reformed. Not everybody can assimilate successfully. And because of the horrors that took place in Nazi Germany, the West has tried its absolute hardest to avoid that obvious point. And that's what's brought us to today, in 2025, where half the American population hates their own country, thinks that we're the root of all evil, and believe that immigrants have a right to break into our country illegally because they consider the United States to be an illegitimate country. This is stolen land. It was built on genocide. It was built on slavery. Therefore, the entire existence of the country is legitimate and therefore has no right to enforce arbitrary borders. The left's view is the depraved cultural behavior of third world country is solely a result of Western colonialism and imperialism. And if it weren't for us, all of these countries would be flourishing and thriving and prosperous. And because it's our fault that they aren't, and we stole all their wealth and all their resources, well, maybe if we just brought them all here to America, they could prove this liberal philosophy correct. But of course, their delusional social experiment has failed horribly, and now we're stuck with the reality where tens and tens and tens of millions of people, both legal and illegal, are in the country who have no appreciation for it at all, some of which actually want to see it destroyed. And we're faced with a tough predicament on how do we solve this? Because any pushback from the citizens will surely be met with the argument, well, what about free speech? Well, what about freedom of religion? Well, the Constitution, bro. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed that rant. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.